about the same size, a little bit smaller, probably the runt of the litter. And I just looked at him and I saw myself. And I know it sounds weird. Yeah, he had red hair, but that was not a determining factor, at least not consciously. But there was something, look in his eyes that said, I want to be your friend. Will you rescue me? And I said, I want that one. My dad goes, are you sure? He didn't look too bright. But I picked him, and next thing I know, we took the dog home, and for the next 14 years, that dog was my loyal companion. He was my protector. He was my number one. And but anyway, that happened on this date 29 years ago. And so today, for those of you that don't know, it's a day of mixed emotions for me. On the positive side, I have that memory. Plus, it's also my mom's birthday. But it was on this date 12 years ago that my dad was declared dead. Technically, he died about 11:30 or shortly after 11:30 the night beforehand, but was declared dead the next day due to paperwork and so forth by the time the coroner could get to his body and examine him and determine the cause of death. So, if I seem more confused than normal, understand I have these conflicting feelings inside of me right now, and that's what we're playing with here. And so my secret's out of the bag. But anyway, getting back to this dream I had last night, I had a dream about Fritz, which is the Rhodesian Ridgeback. That's what I named him. I was not one of those kids that would name their pets ordinary things like Red or Spot or something like that. You know, I loved exotic sounding names, and I thought Fritz was a cool name. I mean, if I'm going to have a friend and I get to choose who he is and name him, I'm going to give him a dignified name. And so I chose Fritz. And then about 5 years later, around Christmas time, 1989, my dad picked up a black and tan dachshund named Hilly. And Hilly, in many ways, was probably the meanest dog I have ever met. That dog had an attitude, and he was a very good hunter. He was stealthy. He was quiet. You know, he only barked when it was absolutely necessary. Compared to Gunther. Gunther barked at any and every little thing. But Hilly was more stealthy. As a matter of fact, Hilly loved to hunt snakes for fun. Well, anyway, last night I had a dream about these two dogs. I don't know why Hilly was in it, because he really wasn't pertinent. But this is kind of out of context of what actually happened in real life. But in the dream, Fritz was dying, and I was with my mom, and we were trying to rescue him. And I just looked at him and I said, you're not going to die, not now, I won't allow it. And somehow he snapped out of it. Now, I don't know what brought that on necessarily, whether it's all these conclave of emotions and memories and feelings that are in my head. Because at one point, Fritz nearly did die before we got Hilly. As a matter of fact, about 2 months before we got Hilly. Not exactly sure what happened, but we think that Fritz may have accidentally ingested or may have been fed some sort of poison. And it was around this time in 1989, and Fritz, had all the signs of a dog that was about to die. I mean, he was losing weight, he was not eating much, hardly drinking any water. So my mom went to the vet, got him some medicine, after describing to the veterinarian what was going on. Within a few hours, Fritz had snapped out of it. But when a dog is about to die, they'll separate themselves from the rest of their pack. And that's what Fritz was doing. He wanted to stay outside, he wanted to stay in the garage. And then within about 2 or 3 hours after he took the medicine, he was acting like a puppy again. So I don't know whether all these memories and feelings are coming together and got into my subconscious, because normally I don't remember dreams, but this one is still very vivid, at least that part of it. But I still don't know how Hilly played a part in this. I just remember seeing him at various times in that dream last night. Well, that's what's on my mind in terms of that for today. Let's see here. Now getting on to the nitty-gritty, the hardcore news parts of today's program. First of all, the state of Arizona back in the news once again. And this time, my position might surprise you, considering that I am a liberal atheist, okay? Seems that a school in Arizona has asked a police officer to not wear his uniform when dropping or picking up his daughter from school. The principal says the issue is what other parents were concerned because obviously the officer had a gun, and they were afraid that their children would be scared seeing a man with a gun on campus. Now, personally, I don't have a problem with that. It's part of his job to carry a gun. And I don't know about you, but even when I was going to school, if I saw a police officer in the parking lot, I'd be scared, but more about what is going on in the school that would require a police officer to be there in the first place. But as far as seeing the gun itself, I felt more secure. For one thing, I know this police officer is trained to use this gun properly and correctly, and will ensure that no one else gets it. And if it, God forbid, something like that should happen, that he'll be able to get it back reasonably quick. So, I think a lot of these parents need to learn more about gun safety. Now, I've only fired a gun a few times in my life, but the first thing my dad taught me before I was even allowed to touch one of his guns was, these are two rules I want you to remember. Never, ever point this at anyone unless your life is in danger, or your police sergeant or your drill sergeant tell you to point this at anyone. This is not a toy. And that has stuck with me. And that lesson was about, I think I was probably about 8, 9 years old maybe. So, it was never an issue for me. But now you have a generation of parents that have probably never been around a gun. And, I have no interest in purchasing them. But I don't think that what the school in Arizona is doing is necessarily right, because it's teaching kids to be afraid of guns. Now, I'm not saying you should be lovey-dovey with them, but you should treat them with respect. And I think they're making a grave mistake. And also, police officers are your friends. They should be. As long as you're obeying the law, they are your friend. Okay? Police officers are there to protect and serve. That is their motto. That is their goal. That is their training. So this school, I think, is teaching these kids the wrong thing. Instead of teaching them that this police officer is here in this community to protect you and to serve you. He's not here to shoot up the place. Okay? I'm not saying police officers don't go bad. That happens. But the majority of them are decent, hardworking, good people. And I admire people that are willing to put their lives on the line to protect me and my loved ones. Have I met bad cops? Of course. But the majority of them are good, decent, hardworking people. Another thing I wanted to talk about, of course, is the latest of the government shutdown. We're now into the third week of the shutdown. And no impasse seems to be there seems to be no progress made in this impasse. However, I have learned this morning, though, within the last hour, that the Senate is now 70 to 80% close to a deal to raise the debt ceiling and end the shutdown. That's according to Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of the state of West Virginia. He says putting an extra 20 to 25% to it, we should continue. When should the continuing resolution come due? When should the debt ceiling come due? And does that give that time for the budget conference, the budget committees to sit down and work this through? Well, those are the details that we have to work out, Manchin and Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine said over the weekend, who led a bipartisan group of 10 other senators to draft a plan that would end the ongoing stalemate in the nation's capital. Now, he said that we have a good template, and he believes that both the Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid of Nevada and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky are looking at that plan. Talking is seen as a breakthrough on Capitol Hill. Reid, however, rejected the plan on Saturday, saying it's not going to go anyplace at this stage. There are two things in it, Reid said Saturday at a press conference. Number one, it opens the government. Number two, it extends the debt ceiling. Other than that, there's little agreement with us. Well, the Senate voted on a separate procedural move to extend the debt limit with no strings attached on Saturday. but the measure fell short of the 60 votes needed to proceed. No deal in sight as the shutdown approaches the third week. Collins said Sunday she is very surprised when she heard that Reid had made his decision about the bipartisan proposal. I was very surprised when Senator Reid said that. I don't know why he said it. I don't think it was very constructive. Collins told CNN's State of the Union with Candy Crowley. But the fact is, we have a responsibility to govern, and we're continuing to talk, and I'm still hopeful that at least we sparked a dialogue that did not exist before we put out a plan. So, what exactly was in their plan? Well, the framework calls for a longer extension of the debt limit and government funding, as well as a 2-year delay on the 2.3% tax on medical devices, which is used to help pay for the new federal health care law. The plan would also give federal agencies greater flexibility to deal with the forced spending cuts known as sequestration. Manchin further explained today the deal would include verification measures to prevent people from scamming or frauding the healthcare insurance system. According to the agreement, the Senate and the House would go to conference to reconcile their differences and work out a long-term budget deal. The deadline for the budget conference, however, is one of the details in the plan that hasn't been worked out. Now, the Treasury Department says it will be unable to pay the government's bills unless the debt limit is increased by this Thursday. Partial shutdown of government services went into effect October 1st, but a key sticking point for Democrats is the sequestration. While the Collins plan gives flexibility on the spending cuts, the Democrats in the White House don't want to agree to anything that allows another round of spending limits to kick in, as they're supposed to in mid-January. McConnell, who faces a Tea Party primary challenge in his 2014 re-election bid, is pushing back hard against the Democrats' insistence to get rid of the currently scheduled spending cuts. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Bob Corker, who's been working closely with Manchin and Collins on the deal, said he has reason to believe that the Senate will come to an agreement sometime today. He says, I know Mitch and Harry, and I think they're about to get to a place to move something, hopefully off the Senate floor, that's widely bipartisan. While it may not attract the fringe on either side, the agreement may allow lawmakers to pass something off the Senate floor. The Senate reconvened briefly yesterday afternoon, but adjourned with no signs of progress on a deal. The Senate meets again today at 1 o'clock Central Daylight Time, while the White House meets at noon. Before leaving Capitol Hill on Sunday, Senator Reid struck a positive note as he spoke on the Senate floor. I've had a productive conversation with the Republican leader this afternoon. Our discussions were substantive, and we'll continue those discussions. I'm optimistic about the prospects for a positive conclusion, he said. So that's where we stand at the moment in regards to ending this shutdown, which has gone on far, far too long. Now, speaking of the shutdown, I learned about this yesterday, and that there's some dirty trickery going on just a day prior to the shutdown. And, of course, that's hardly news in Washington, D.C., but it is so blatant, and I can't believe that it has stayed hidden in the news for so long. And what I'm talking about is the GOP undermining the process. Seems late on the evening of Monday, September 30th this year, the House Rules Committee, the Republicans on that committee, changed the rules of the House. Remember this. The Republicans changed the rules of the House so that the only member allowed to call up the Senate's clean CR for a vote was Majority Leader Eric Cantor or his designee, which all but guarantees the government would shut down a few hours later and would stay shut down for a long period of time. Previously, any member who would have had the right to bring up the CR for a vote would have been allowed. But the Republicans impeded due process, and democracy has been suspended in the House of Representatives. Now, here is some audio from that night. Okay, we're going to play it for you right now. That's a little bit long, but this is our federal government